Hey cats, it's Ed Midsole Bud here. I've never reviewed a shoe from Kiprun until today. Thanks for tuning in, people. I've got a review for you today of a brand new shoe from Kiprun. We have here the KD900X LD. Bit of a mouthful of a name, it has to be said, but certainly a more easy to swallow price. How does it hold up against some of the other Supershoe contenders? This is a shoe that Kiprun have sent me for review, but they're not paying me to make this video, nor will they be vetting my views before my valued viewers get to see them. So some stats for you on the Kiprun first. This one's coming in about 244 grams or 8.7 ounces for my UK size 11, US 12. So that is roughly the same as the Saucony Endorphin Pro 4 or even the Alphafly 3 or the Endorphin Elite. So we're talking low weight here. In my size of the shoes, we've got 39mm in the heel and about 35mm up front. So it makes for about a 4mm drop. That might be music to some people's ears, though for others they're probably looking for a little bit more stack perhaps if they're going to use it for a marathon. So very similar to something like the Takumi Sen 10 from Adidas, and the comparisons don't stop there really. The foam, Ed, tell us about the foam. Okay, this stuff's called V-Foam Plus. It is very sort of rubbery, a little bit more responsive, slightly more on the denser side of things. I found it does break in after a few runs. I initially had a score of about 30 on the Shore Hygrometer scale. After a few runs it softened up a bit. I've got about 26. So the property of the foam does really soften up. Get your tenderizer out. Rubber on the bottom around about 60, so it's pretty much the same as some of the other compounds that we find on other super shoes. This one's coming in at about 159 smackaroonies here in the UK, so that's 159 quid or earth credits or whatever denomination you want to use. Before we get into the main part of the review, help me to grow the channel by hitting that subscribe button, also giving this video a thumbs up like and commenting below. Dankeschön. We'll start with the upper first, as usual. Upper wise, I think the shoe's going to be good for narrow-footed runners. I think perhaps if you've got a wide foot, it might be a little bit too narrow and glove-like. There's not all that much material on either side of the shoe that you need to pull in. They've not been over-generous, that's for sure. It's like the complete opposite of the Vaporfly 3, really. Laces here, quite firm and quite rigid. Really not my favourite at all, actually. There is some strategically placed padding in the tongue to alleviate some of the pressure, but I found the laces are a little bit too coarse, really. Quite like the ones on the Hoka Silo 1X, but those work great. I think I'd prefer something a little bit easier to kind of pull in here. I think this one fits pretty much true to size, though I would declare go to Decathlon and actually try out a pair of these if you want to buy them. It could be that you want to order like your standard size and maybe a half size down, but for me, in my typical UK 11, they are perfect. A pretty good lockdown was achieved using the extra eyelets at the end here for a runner's knot. I really couldn't get locked into the shoe just using a standard kind of arrangement. As with a lot of carbon plate shoes, you really want to be locked into them to get the most you can out of them in terms of propulsion and toe off. I think these are really aimed at faster, higher speed sessions. For me, not really a marathon shoe, I'll tell you that straight off the bat. It's going to be those sort of faster paced races, the 5k, the 10k, maybe the half marathon. This one just isn't set up for standard everyday mileage, so don't expect that from the shoe. There is no heel counter here, you've just got some padding in there. It's super flexible, does remind me a little bit of the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 2. The upper does taper quite considerably on the lateral side as well. It's very much one of those European type fits. Think Adidas, think Puma. It absolutely feels at home in that category. I have noted that some other people that have reviewed the shoes have said they've had some heel pain around here, certainly around the ankle, lots of like blood and stuff. I've not had anything like that at all. I think that's down to compression of the midsole here. The foot's kind of sinking down and the ankle's starting to rub up against the upper here on the shoe. I think perhaps if you're heavily heel striking, that might be a bit of an issue. I don't seem to have had any of those problems whatsoever. I think it's a good reason why, though, Nike have got that heel padding raised up a little bit, certainly towards the ankle. As you can see here, it kind of goes downwards a little bit and it should really come up this way. I think that's a bit of a design issue. Perhaps they can sort that out in, you know, future iterations. I think you can get a good appreciation of whether a shoe is a marathon option by doing some longer runs in it. This one for me is not that shoe. It's certainly probably half marathon at the most. I've experienced no tongue slide or anything at all so far using the Kiprun. Doesn't slide down towards the toe box or sideways. Main issue here really is lace tension. You're either going to get it working right for you or it won't. Too loose and the shoe will not shine. You won't get as much out of it. I certainly will be trying out a lace swap in this model. It's quite a minimal vamp though, so yeah, wide foot runners probably not going to work. I'll give this one a 2.6 out of 3 for the upper after my initial runs.
Midsole now.
So the V-Foam Plus, quite a responsive material really. Don't think like P-backs or anything like that. It's more bouncy rather than squashy. Certainly fits into the mould of the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 2, maybe like the Magic Speed from Asics, or the original Nike Zoom Fly Flyknit, or the Takumi Sen 10. We really have to talk about that shoe in terms of this one as well. Don't pick up this shoe expecting a nice daily option, or even like a marathon pace shoe. Absolutely tuned to those sort of steady sessions and upwards really, faster intervals, maybe some long runs with sections at your goal pace, perhaps half marathon use. The very narrow nature of the heel here probably going to mean that this one's for those sort of faster paced runners out there. The 900 fits with those other shoes I've mentioned, though with a slightly easier to swallow price. Though many will be put off by the fact it's just a really narrow heel back here. Marathon paced effort, it felt okay. I wouldn't suggest it was the best. Consistent underfoot feel though. It does feel a little bit low, like the insole sells the shoe short. It's just a standard foam type and it compresses really heavily over time. Doesn't quite do the V-Foam Plus justice, though it's easy enough to whip out and substitute that. This is certainly a denser material with a bit of spring and pop to it. The plate's certainly very apparent on toe off, it has to be said, and I think some people will like the sleek and slender nature of the shoe. It's a way better application of that than something like the Zoom Fly, for example, or that overly rigid Kinvara Pro. So this one really fits in terms of the shoe rotation with the Takumi Sen 10. I think that one just flies a little bit better for me though, a little less effort required to get some of those faster speeds out of me. Not sure this is really though a cruising model for the marathon. Perhaps the 4mm drop also comes into play here. I don't think the drop is going to be ideal for people wanting a marathon shoe. I think staying out of the heel in the KD900 is probably a best bet, and it's very decoupled as well. There's like a huge gap here between that forefoot section and the heel. It's not that sort of rolling, sockeny speed roll type feel that we've had in some of their shoes, closer to the Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 2 if anything. Overall quite an aggressive shoe and you've got to run fast to get some really good results out of it. A tool for the rotation more than anything, but I am keen to see what Kiprun do with their midsoles in future iterations. I'll give this one a reasonably good 2.6 out of 3 for the midsole so far. Outsole now. Outsole wise, it's another turn up for the books really, bit of a strange one in terms of design. There's a very thick application of rubber here on the underside of the shoe, which sort of stretches back in the heel and that sort of beveled area. This feels like it's a little bit overdone here under the forefoot. They could have shaved off some more weight, turned the shoe into an even faster model. The other competitors are all trimming off rubber, putting the minimum that you need on there, and I think we'll probably see that in a V3 of the shoe. Now the other odd thing about the exposed midsole area here that we've got in the KD900 is that this part here will never really touch the ground. In fact, after my initial runs it was completely untouched. Had a tiny little bit of debris caught in the back and the front here, but this bit was just left completely sort of white here. I can see this one lasting for miles and miles before you burn through this rubber. It's pretty thick, though with all that extra additional rubber here that we've got, it does make the shoe feel a little bit bottom heavy. Again, reminding me somewhat of the Magic Speed from Asics. A little bit less perhaps of the Fast R Nitro Elite 2. It is easy to clean though with your stiff bristle brush if that's your thing. With more rubber there's a little bit more foam protection here from those sort of sharper objects, but as a race model it just feels a little bit overdone. Grip and traction pretty decent, but there's just too much of it there really. I'll give this a 2.6 for the outsole after my initial runs. Value now, well, at this sort of price it's hard to knock a shoe that's got all this tech built into it. It's pretty nimble, feels nice and minimal in terms of operation. It's one of those low profile type shoes if you like those. They're not sort of creeping up and around the back of your foot. It's no huge like heel tab or anything. Though you can't really escape it in the larger sizes, this one does look a little bit torpedo-like. But build quality, really good. No dodgy stitching or glue marks anywhere. No misaligned panels or anything. It does feel like quite a good quality item out of the box. I think at 160 Earth credits, it's going to appeal to quite a few people. It will appear on their radar. I think if you want something that's like a replacement for the Sen, or perhaps the upper on that just doesn't work for you, and you don't want to shell out the extra Earth credits for the Adidas model, then the KD900 could fit that bill. I just feel that Sen is a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more subtle. I think it is perhaps worth spending the extra Earth credits. If you don't want to do that, go and pick up a pair of the Sen 8 or 9. They're always on discount, sometimes for around about 100 quid. Niche shoes are great, you know, when the specific model works for you for a certain session. But in this case, they've tried to make it a do-it-all sort of shoe for all sorts of races, and it isn't really a master of any of them. And with a lot of the discounted super shoes from last year going at about 150 quid now, like the Adios Pro 3 or the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, it kind of makes it hard to recommend this one over the others. I think the upper could do with some subtle changes here to improve it somewhat. Change up the padding in the heel, for example. New set of thinner laces. Upgrade that insole as well, and some thinner rubber on the outsole. Though by then we'd have quite a different shoe in that respect. I think if it was like 140 quid, it would make it a little bit more of an attractive pickup. But don't forget that 4mm drop isn't going to be for everybody. Some people won't go anywhere below like an 8mm drop, so yeah, this one would really have to kick it. As such, this one's very much a tempo and speed shoe only for me, perhaps for some 5k or 10k racing as well. Just a little bit too niche for some people to pick up and put into the rotation. I'll give this a 2.6 for value. I think it's offering quite a bit, but there's some perhaps better discounts out there at the moment. So that gives us a 10.4 out of 12 after my initial runs for the Kiprun Kd900X LD. Certainly an interesting shoe to test out. It wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. Still quite enjoyable though. It's good to get up to some sort of half marathon and 10k paces in it, though I feel there's a few changes that they could make that would really improve the general performance. Let me know your thoughts on this one down in the comments.
It's musical interlude time.
Musical interlude today comes from Jerry Lee Lewis live at the Star Club in Hamburg. This was like back in the 60s. Early 60s, I do believe. Jerry Lee is on absolute fire here. He's got a band backing him, and he seems to be almost goading them to go faster and faster and play with more furious sort of poison and venom. The version of Great Balls of Fire is just absolute chaos. You can hear all the German fans there shouting for more. They're absolutely enthused that Jerry's even there playing, and the band really produced the goods and keep on with him through to the bitter end. It sounds like he's literally trying to destroy the piano at certain points. He must be hammering it like so hard. Be amazed to see if it was still in tune after all that beating he gave it. If you've never heard this before, one of the greatest rock and roll live performances there is going, aside perhaps from Bo Diddley's Beach Party, go and check it out, Jerry Lee Lewis live at the Star Club. Thanks for tuning in, people. It's always appreciated. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. Drop us a comment below for the
algorithm.
My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you.